1160 and WCCSradio.com. And it is a beautiful Friday morning. Mr. Bob Pollock is with us. Bob Pollock brought to us this morning. If my computer ever wakes up, there it finally goes. Now I can reset it. Bob Pollock with us this morning, brought to you by Marcus and Mack, voted best law firm and best personal injury lawyer 3 years in a row in the Best of Indiana County contest. Visit them online at marcusandmack.com. Mr. Pollock, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Wonderful. The weather is certainly going to pick it up for us. That
Yes.
makes it nice. I have noticed that with the cooler weather, the grasses have recovered with the lack of rain for so long this summer. We got some really hard rains and maybe a little bit steadier rain for a couple of weeks. And now the grasses, they seem to have caught back up.
Yes, they like this much better. A little bit of moisture and a little bit cooler weather, and off they go.
Cool season grasses, too. Later in the summer, that's when other grasses take over in that blend, right?
Yes. Well, they're all typically cool season grasses. Mm-hmm. They're just different species in that mix that most people have, and they like it cooler. So they will put on, of course, their most growth in the spring, but then as we, and then it slows down in the summer, and then we pick it back up again in the late summer and early fall.
Yeah.
So but now can be a good time to also look at your yard. Are there places where, maybe it's not coming back here or there, and take a look at that and see if those spots are dead, and if so, do we need to get in there and do some seeding, which really we're moving into that time frame now where we can start to make those repairs as necessary. Yeah.
Let's take a call. Good morning.
Good morning.
What can we do for you?
I was wondering if when you plant two different kinds of tomato plants side by side, if they will cross-pollinate.
Plant two different kinds of tomatoes side by side. Will they cross-pollinate, Bob?
Typically, if you have a regular round beefsteak type tomato, and then you plant a cherry tomato or a grape tomato or even a Roma tomato, those are all going to, even though they'd be near each other, they will still come true to type.
Oh, okay. All right.
Have you noticed something in your garden?
Well, I thought I planted 8 of the beefsteak tomatoes, and there's just a lot of cherry tomatoes coming up, and I'm going, oh my goodness, could they just turn into something different?
That's probably volunteers left over from, because those grape tomatoes, they do leave a lot of seeds, and they probably just came back from last year, right, Bob?
Yeah, you're saying there's actual other plants coming up other than what you planted.
Well, I only have 4 beefsteaks. I don't know what happened to the other 4. And I thought, unless they cross-pollinated.
No, that shouldn't have happened. Maybe they could have been mismarked when you got them.
Well, that is the other thing. I have had that happen too.
Yeah, that's a possibility, and that can happen sometimes.
Okay, well, I had never heard about cross-pollination between tomato plants, so I was checking with you.
Yep. So
okay,
now
thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And it takes a lot more time to pick the cherry tomatoes, doesn't it? Doesn't fill up the basket.
But it's easier to pop one of them into your mouth than it is a beefsteak.
Yes, it is. Definitely. Don't need a knife.
But that's interesting, the way that she said that, because I guess there could be a chance where some seeds get run over by a tractor. I'm just throwing this out there. Get run over by a tractor and crushed, and the one seed mixes with the other seed, and all of a sudden you've got freak seeds happening out there in the garden. That's
right.
Probably not going to happen.
Yeah. You can get, those, you've got to have, each of those 2 seeds. So we've got to mature those seeds, and then you've got to grow those seeds. And then when those 2 different plants flower and cross-pollinate,
So
that can happen.
the
But you're still going to
cross-pollination is going to happen in the flowering stage.
yeah, but you're still right. Yeah,
Okay.
you're still going to get
So little Mr. B goes to the cherry tomato plant, and he gets his legs all covered in pollen off of the cherry tomato, and then he says, "Hey, that beefsteak plant over there looks pretty good." Goes over there and does his deal over there, and so what was on his body from the cherry tomato gets into the other one.
yeah, but in that case, it's still going to make either a beefsteak tomato or a cherry tomato. That pollen gets moved around because that pollen will not create a whole new plant.
It won't.
No, you're going to get that plant that's there, even though it gets pollen from that other type, is still going to make that beefsteak tomato.
This seems like a good time for this.
Science isn't a fact. That's why it's called science fiction, not science faction.
Okay. All right.
Very true.
All right. So a little bit of science news for you today here on Indiana.
But that,
in
yeah.
the Morning.
Now you can get pumpkins and winter squash and things like that. You can get that can happen. You can grow volunteers, and then those volunteers, they might make the same thing, and they might be something different the next year. That can happen.
Wow, this conversation went in directions I never envisioned.
Yeah, well, me neither.
All right, so there you go. Some garden. As long as we're in the garden, let's stay there for a moment or so. Talking with one of our Amish neighbors yesterday, we were talking about our gardens and how they've been doing, and they were asking us about our tomatoes and how they did, and they did pretty well. They got beat up a little bit by the storms and didn't come back as strong because of the storms. And there's the same case, but they had a lot of rot in their tomato plants this year and in the tomatoes themselves. And she was wondering if that was the case around the neighborhood. Does it stick to certain areas when you have that sort of thing? I'm thinking of blight, even though we're not talking about blight in this neighborhood. But say in northern Indiana County that blight jumped in there, and so Indiana County would be one of the areas listed as blight, and it's not. I'm just hypothetically.
What if?
Down south in the southern portion of Indiana County, is it going to zip down there all that quickly?
Typically not from north to south. It can much
From west to east.
It can much more easily travel from south to north and, of course, southwest to northeast, because that's typically the way our fronts come in.
That's where our winds come from.
The way the wind patterns go. So we can move those spores in those directions a lot easier, and then unless we have a nor'easter, which typically, we don't have very regularly, then that can push things the other way. But it is interesting how some of those patterns go, because with downy mildew is one that's tracked, and of course late blight is tracked. And especially with downy, we've seen downy down in the southeast part of the state. And then it's also it might be in Ohio or up in New York or up at, and actually there was a spot up in Crawford County and then up in Erie and then across the border into New York.
So southeast and northwest Pennsylvania.
Right. So did those spores all come from the same place, or did they come from different places in the south? And then as storm fronts moved up the east coast, that hit the east part of the state, and then other storms that may have come up from Georgia and Texas and come up our way caused those events, west and north of us.
Well, since downy mildew and late blight are tracked, are we still good in Indiana County?
So we are right now, but it's to the east of us, it's to the north of us, and that typically will attack cucumbers. And related plants.
So cucumber season's about done in our gardens anyway.
Right. Yeah, we're we're approaching the slowdown of that. Hopefully,
ours
you've
are
had
out.
a good harvest at this point.
Yeah, we had a good cucumber year, and they're out now.
Yeah, and two, those fronts that came through that produced all that heavy rain, boy, they don't like that. And so they may have been looking very good, and then we had those rain events, and then those plants can start to decline in a hurry.
Yeah. Ag Progress Days last week, right?
Yes. That
Indiana County Fair coming up this week. It's that season of the year, right?
It sure is. Here we go. We're moving to the end of August into September. Mm-hmm. So we start to kind of retrain our thoughts, and really it's a time to, you can be looking ahead now. Are there plants that I maybe didn't do well that I want to replace, or maybe some plants that died this summer that I want to replace? So now's a good time to be looking at that, thinking about that, and if you want to do fall planting,
probably don't want to do it next week when it's going to be 90. But
no, but really we're moving into shorter days and cooler nights, and so a little bit more moderate conditions that we can get. A lot of plants can be planted this time of year, and
as long as they aren't wasted days and wasted nights. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
It's Indiana in the Morning.
Have a new do-it-yourself mission? Or are you still looking for that elusive window latch or hard-to-find tool to finish the job? Fret not, folks. Innovations of Home is the fix-it and fix-it-right wizard of your dreams. On Route 119 Marion Center, Innovations of Home is your one-stop shop for all things home-related. Don't want to leave your comfy couch? No worries. Just click on inhomepa.com and voila. Give your home the treat it deserves today. Innovations of Home in Marion Center. You know, the place that has everything.
President Biden's big inflation problem is still here. The Pittsburgh Post-Gazette reported, quote, more working Pennsylvania families are struggling to make ends meet. But instead of helping us, Senator Bob Casey backed President Biden's disastrous agenda. Casey voted with Biden 98% of the time, including for trillions in wasteful spending. All of that Washington spending made inflation worse, making families pay more. If that wasn't enough, Casey also voted repeatedly in favor of higher taxes on Social Security benefits. That's right, Senator Casey voted in favor of higher taxes on seniors' benefits, leaving seniors with less money in their pockets. Higher taxes for seniors and higher prices for everyone. Call Senator Casey at 202-224-6324. Tell him to put Pennsylvania families first and fix his inflation disaster. Support S575, the Fight Inflation Through Balanced Budgets Act, paid for by One Nation, onenationamerica.org.
Do you ever have questions in your life? Questions that you are searching to find answers to? Hi, I'm Pastor Ben Blowers with the Indiana Wesleyan Methodist Church, and I want to invite you to listen to our church-sponsored program, The Voice of Victory, every Sunday morning at 7:30 a.m. on this station, AM 1160 WCCS and 101.1 FM. Tune in and find biblical help, guidance, and inspiration for answering life's questions.
101.1 FM and AM 1160 WCCS.